And welcome back to another Econ podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit more about the concept of equilibrium. And we said on some previous podcasts that equilibrium is where the demand curve and the supply curve intersect. We said all natural forces are going to drive us to that point. If the price is above equilibrium, it's going to get bid down by surpluses. Producers will bid down the price. If the price is below equilibrium, then there will be a shortage and consumers will bid up the price. So all natural forces are going to drive us to this point, this equilibrium price where the quantity demanded is exactly equal to the quantity supplied. So this is what a market will look like. This is what equilibrium looks like. And that's where the market will stay as long as nothing changes, which we will talk about in the future. What happens if something changes? We'll talk about that on some future videos. What we want to do now is we just want to identify and state very clearly why this is so beneficial, that what the market is doing. What is so beneficial about it? Well, what we want to do to answer that question is to look at this area on the graph and this area on the graph. That top triangle is what we call consumer surplus. Consumer surplus. Now, consumer surplus is defined as, or at least I'm going to define consumer surplus as the happiness that the consumer gets for which he did not have to pay. Okay? And more generally, it's how much he gains from trade. How much did his happiness increase from the trade? Now, let's look at that and see what it means on the demand curve. On the graph, I'm sorry. So here's the demand curve. What the demand curve really is the demand curve is the marginal benefit to the consumer of enjoying the good, whatever the good is. Let's say it's pizza. The marginal benefits or demand is how much happiness the consumer gets from buying the pizza. Okay? Now, we know from being at equilibrium that the consumer is going to buy this much pizza, Q1 pizza. That's how much they're going to buy at equilibrium. So their happiness that they get from it is going to be along the demand curve up here until this point. This is where they'll stop buying it. So this is the happiness that they're going to get. The height of the demand curve represents the happiness the consumer gets from buying pizza. Now, how much did they pay for the pizza? Well, they didn't have to pay all the way up here at their happiness. They only had to pay down here at the price. They only had to pay down here at the price. So the happiness that they get that is up here and above what they had to pay for the pizza, that is this area in here, that is called the consumer surplus. It's the happiness that they didn't have to pay for. So just kind of think about it this way. If they buy a piece of pizza, that first piece of pizza that they buy, it's going to give them a level of happiness all the way up here on the demand curve, but they only have to pay a price of P1 to buy it. And so this extra happiness right here, that's the consumer surplus. That's the happiness they didn't have to pay for. And that will be true for pizza number 2 and pizza number 3, all the way up to Q1 pizzas. Pieces of pizza. And so this area is what we call the consumer surplus. It's the happiness that goes to the consumer for which they did not have to pay. That is called consumer surplus. Now, what does the producer get out of all of this? Well, the producer out of this trade gets what we call producer surplus. Producer surplus. And that is the amount that they get paid beyond what was necessary to get them to produce the good. So the supply curve, remember, it's kind of like the opportunity cost curve. It's the cost of bringing the good to market. So the cost of bringing the good to market is down here along the supply curve. That's the cost of bringing the good to market. And they're going to bring, remember, at equilibrium, they're going to bring Q1 units to market. And here's the cost on the supply curve of bringing those to market. But then they get paid a price up here at equilibrium. They get paid a price up here at equilibrium. So in other words, the producer gets paid a price that is higher than his opportunity cost. It's higher than his next best opportunity. The price they get paid for producing the good is above their next best opportunity. It's above their opportunity cost. So again, think about that pizza. If a producer produces pizza, their opportunity cost would be right here. Let me just change my color. The price for that first unit of pizza would be the cost for that first unit of pizza would be right here on the supply curve. That's his cost of producing the first unit of pizza, but then he gets paid a price in the marketplace at equilibrium up here at P1. So the amount that he gets paid, the price that he gets paid above and beyond his cost of bringing the pizza to market, that's his producer surplus. And that will be true for the second pizza and the third pizza and the fourth pizza and so on and so forth. So this lower triangle will be his producer surplus. So the consumer gets something. They get happiness that they didn't pay for. They get happiness above what they had to pay. And the producer, they get paid more than it costs them to produce the good. So both the consumer is better off as a result of the trade, happiness that they didn't pay for. The producer's better off as a result of the trade. They got paid above what it cost them to produce the good. So they're both better off as a result of the trade. They're both better off. And so if we add those two things together, we get what we call the total gains of trade. The total gains of trade. The top triangle represents the consumer surplus, the happiness the consumer got above what they had to pay, and the bottom triangle, that represents the producer surplus. That's they got paid more than what it cost them to bring the good to market. If you take that consumer and producer surplus together, that gives you the total gains of trade, and that's the big triangle. That is the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus gives you the total gains of trade. Okay, right there it is on the supply and demand graph. And this helps explains why consumers and producers like to trade in the market. This is why people trade, because they are both made better off from the trade. Okay, consumer and producer surplus. This has been Mr. Hagan, and we will see you on the next podcast.